Hello my lovelies. Today I'm going to be making chicken and dumplings. I'm going to be using soy curls for the chicken. Now, I know you guys don't know me, most of you don't, but those who do know, all my adult life I have been famous for my chicken and dumplings. So when I went plant-based, my poor son was just horrified. That was the first thing he said. No more chicken and dumplings. So when we fooled him and said we were giving him chicken and it was soy curls, he was completely convinced. The first thing he said was, "Oh God, Mom, thank you. I needed meat." And we all laughed and told him that it wasn't meat because he was thoroughly convinced that I had fed him chicken. So he came up with the idea that I make my famous chicken and dumplings with soy curls. So let's give it a go, shall we? So I've started just with my regular Dutch oven, and I've got water and it's heating. You can see little bubbles starting to boil. Now normally this would be where I was cooking my chicken, right? So what I'm going to do is I have put half a bag, here's the other half, and that's a 8-ounce bag. And don't worry, I'll put a link to where you can get these. I've put that in a little bowl to marinate because you have to rehydrate them. They are dry, dehydrated. So I put in 1 teaspoon of liquid smoke, and this is hickory, you can use whatever you want. And then 1 tablespoon reduced sodium soy sauce, and then covered with water until they rehydrated and they're nice and squishy. Okay, now I'm going to put this marinade and all into my pot because the first thing in chicken and dumplings is the chicken. Now, to season this a little more and give it a little more salty flavor, I'm going to use some white miso paste. And again, don't worry, I'll put a link for this. I live in a really rural, small area. I can't find these ingredients unless I buy them online. So if you're in the same boat I am and you can't find them, I'll show you where you can get them. So I'm just going to use about a tablespoon of miso paste. And miso paste is really salty. And it's kind of like a thick vegetable bouillon is the flavor that it gives when I add it to things like this. And yes, I'm dunking my finger in there just because I want to get the rest of that off. And once again, you know me, I forgot to grab my towel. Okay, then I have got 1 onion that I cut up, and I'm just going to add that in and let it cook with my faux chicken. Now you saw what I did. Drop some down here. That's my offering to the kitchen gods. Got to have an offering. And then I'm going to use some organic minced garlic, and that's just because I'm lazy and I don't mince my own garlic. And that's about a tablespoon there. Now I'm also going to use onion powder and garlic powder in addition with the fresh. So let's have about a tablespoon of these. And then I want about a teaspoon of black pepper. Now if you're allergic to black pepper, then don't worry about that. You can leave that out, but I like to have that. And yes, this recipe will be in my Celtic cookbook. So if you're wondering where you can find that written down, you'll just have to be a little more patient with me for that cookbook to come out. All right, and then that's the only seasoning I'm going to put into this. Okay, give it a good stir. Then I have got about 4 good-sized potatoes, and I've just cut those bite size, okay? Now see, that is quite full. Now, some people like really soupy chicken and dumplings. They like that broth really thin. I don't. I like mine thick, like a gravy, and that's what sets my chicken and dumplings apart from everybody else's and puts me over the top, okay? Everybody who eats my chicken and dumplings wants the recipe, and whenever I give them the recipe, they deviate from the recipe and it doesn't come out. And then they're like, why isn't mine thick like yours? Because you didn't follow the recipe. If you want yours to come out like mine, follow the recipe. Don't say, oh, I don't like that, so I left it out. Follow the recipe. You'll really be glad that you did. And people have done that. So my secret ingredient, 1 cup of rice. Well, nobody else puts rice in their chicken and dumplings. I know, that's why I'm different. Why does that thicken it up? Because the starch from the rice mixes with the starch from the potatoes as it cooks, and it makes it thick and rich and succulent. It's just amazing. So let that cook until those potatoes are tender and the rice is really incorporated. Once it's a thick gravy, you won't even know the rice is there because it just incorporates in. Okay, it just about melts. So just leave it go. Now you can do this in a crock pot if you want to leave it sit for a long time, but that's not necessary. I'm just doing it on the stove, and I'm going to come back to it in a good half an hour or so, and then we'll do the dumplings. Okay? Okay, I've been cooking it for about an hour on the stove, and the potatoes are nice and soft, and the rice is cooked through. Hopefully you can see that. See how thick that is? And you'll notice it's a golden color. This is the point where you want to taste it, because I don't know how much water you used, how big your pot is, and everyone's tastes are different, and I've been accused of putting more spices than other people like. So when I create recipes, I try to go a little bit leaner on the spices and then add more as my family likes. So at this point, take a little spoon and blow and taste it and see what you like. I added some of this salt-free seasoning. That's what gave it this golden color. And I just dumped some in there. And then I added a little of this no salt as well, just because it didn't quite have as much flavor as what I like. And see how it's nice bubbling away here on the stove. I've turned my fire down to about 2.5 now. My dials go low to high, which about a 7 would be high. So this is low, but not quite low. So medium low, I would say medium low. But it's still nice and bubbling, and this is where we're going to make our dumplings. So let me just turn you a little bit so that you can see over here, and I'll scoot this stuff over this way. Sorry guys, camera positioning. All right, so what I've got for dumplings is I've put 4 cups of flour into a big bowl, and this is my organic unbleached flour, and this is a white flour. You can use wheat if that's what you prefer. If you want a whole wheat for your dumpling, go ahead and use that. And then I've got 1 teaspoon of baking soda and 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. And basically all my dumplings are, I like the big fluffy dumplings like biscuits. I'm not one to roll them out into like a noodle type dumpling. I use the big fluffy biscuit dumplings. And then stir that around really good. And then I also like pepper, so I'm going to add some pepper, and I'm just sprinkling it on top. You can see there. And then to give those dumplings a little more flavor, I'm going to take some of my onion powder and just sprinkling it over the top. Okay. And then, sorry, I'm going to keep stirring because I don't want my rice to get stuck at the bottom at this point of the juncture. And that's happened to me before, and I've got kind of a scalded. Now, let me just caution you when you reheat this, because we're making a great big pot, you'll want to reheat this for leftovers. Don't put it on the stove to reheat it. It's too thick. You'll break up your dumplings and it will scorch. So you will want to microwave this soup when you reheat it. Now, I don't use any oil. So what I use is applesauce. And see these little individual size tubs that you can buy? That's exactly half a cup. And I buy these just for baking because it is half a cup. And half a cup is how much I always use, whatever bread or dough. If I'm making pizza or biscuits, whatever, it's always half a cup. So these are exactly portioned into half a cup, and that's what I use. I'm just going to stir that through. And if you've ever made biscuits, then you know you just have to use however much water it takes. And I'll try and measure that for you. So let me get a measure so that we can kind of guesstimate approximately how much water you'll use. And I'm thinking probably anywhere from a cup to a cup and a half for the water. Got my kettle here. I'm going to start with cup and a half and see. And you know what biscuit dough looks like. Surely. Just real thick, plumped up. Can you see it as I'm mixing there? And some people do like those rolled flat dumplings, and if you like that, then just take this out and roll it if that's what you want. I've never been one to like those. The problem with making chicken and dumplings at my house is after we've had this, my husband seems to think that every soup I make should have dumplings in it. And he will sit at the table and say, you know what would have made this even better? Dumplings. So he thinks I'm supposed to put dumplings in everything. All right, now I'm going to turn you back around here so that you can see the pot. Now let's give it a good stir. Now as this cools, it gets even thicker. And that's true with most soups. So it's just real thick. Okay, and then we're just going to take this dough. I'm going to put it over here so that you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to take spoonfuls. And I'm going to drop it in. And it will cook just like a biscuit, a soft biscuit in the top of the soup. And little bits of flour will fall off as it cooks, and it will make that soup even thicker. Now I'll tell you a secret, and this is a really funny story. you all know, if you follow me, my husband is British. But he's not my first husband. My first husband was from Kentucky. And I was sitting, and I must have been, 20, 22 years old. I was real young. Sitting at the table, I had made my chicken and dumplings for my in-laws. And my father-in-law looked at my mother-in-law and said, "She makes better chicken and dumplings than you. And she's from California." They were from Kentucky. I had never seen a woman shoot darts out of her eyes so quick as she did to her husband. I thought he was going to go to blows right there. You don't say something like that to a Kentucky woman. Now see how I'm just pushing these down into the top of the soup? That's going to help them cook on both sides. Don't stir at this point. If you stir at this point, you will break up your dumplings. And then you're just going to let that cook a good 20 minutes, and I'll be back. Now at this point, you've got to be careful, because that rice and that soup is so thick, it'll scorch on the bottom if you're not careful. So this is the crucial point, and I'm going to show you how to do this very carefully. You can see the dumplings at the top. I'm going to slide my spoon between those dumplings, and I'm just doing like this on the bottom. I'm not stirring, which will break up the dumplings before they get formed and cooked. I'm taking my spoon and going against the bottom of my pan to keep that from sticking. Now, I told you I was famous for this recipe. My daughter, the week of her wedding, when I went down to prepare for the wedding, made me teach her how to cook chicken and dumplings the week of her wedding. And then for the first 2 or 3 times she made it, she called me on the phone to be sure she was doing all the steps right and she hadn't forgotten anything. And now she's an old pro just like her mama. See how I'm just going around? I'm keeping my spoon in the center, and I'm going around the edges. And that'll keep it off the bottom and not break up your dumplings, because you want your dumplings big and flat and big fluffy dumplings. Now after a good 10-15 minutes on one side, we're going to need to flip those dumplings over so that they will cook on both sides. Just take your spoon and gently grab each dumpling and flip. And again, you're going to be careful not to break them apart. And you know your dumplings are finished when you do break one and it looks like a biscuit inside. But right now, that top is still real doughy. So I've got to get each dumpling flipped. Now, the trouble that I have in my house, and I'll be honest with you, is that everybody wants to eat the dumplings the first night. And you see, this is a big pot. We're a family of 4. So if they eat all the dumplings the first night, there's no dumplings for the second night. And since it's so thick, it's hard to reheat on the stove. I generally microwave it because it will scorch. And I've had that happen, and it was awful. Now I'm going to go again and stir the bottom right in through the center, and then I'm scraping all the way around in a circle. Keep that from sticking, because it is a thick, hearty stew. Okay, and I'll come back in about 15 minutes. Then just keep gently flipping those dumplings over with your spoon. Just grab one, flip it over, and put it back in the soup. And then don't forget to stir the bottom until they're all done. And you'll see them get real fluffy. See how fluffy they are? They're sticking up out of the pot. You can see those soy curls look just like chicken. And there's a big old potato. And just keep doing that for a good 20 minutes until these dumplings are completely done. And just go in through the center and scrape the bottom of that pot. Okay, and they'll need to be flipped a good 2 or 3 times, okay? All right. Remember I said it's really, really thick? I'm gonna show you what I mean. And it's just cooking down and all the starches going together. This is what I'm talking about. It's really, really thick. Okay? So how do you know when it's done? Well, when your dumplings are done, your chicken and dumplings are done, basically. So just pull out a dumpling onto a little plate and cut it. I'm going to do that down here, sorry, so that I don't fling it off of my plate. And when it looks like a biscuit inside, then it's done. See there? I'm just going to put that back in there. And there you have Tina Turner chicken and dumplings. No chicken.